Hi folks, in this video I'll be discussing universal credit and I'll go over how you can be eligible for universal credit, how much you can get paid, and the step-by-step process on how to claim universal credit. This video will be quite long, and if you want to quickly see if you can claim universal credit and how much you can claim, then I recommend using a benefits calculator such as the Turn to Us benefits calculator. Okay, so universal credit is a benefit for those on low income to support them with the cost of living. It includes a standard payment you get just for being eligible for universal credit, and it also includes extra payments to support housing costs, disability costs, and costs with having children. Universal credit was rolled out in 2013 and it replaced previous benefits including housing benefit, income-related employment and support allowance, income-based job seekers allowance, child tax credit, working tax credit, and income support. Firstly, I will go over how you can be eligible for universal credit. To be eligible for universal credit, you must live in the UK, be aged 18 or over with exceptions for 16 and 17-year-olds, be under the state pension age, and have less than £16,000 in money and savings. All money, savings and investments you have in the UK and abroad are taken into account, including cash, money in your bank account, and any money in a savings account. This even includes any income you make from your job, except income that you pay into a private pension. This is because universal credit is based on your take-home pay, so paying tax or paying into a private pension will reduce your income and increase your universal credit payments. Also, the value of your property or any possession you own, like a car or household item, is not taken into account for savings. The exception to this is if you bought any sort of property to deliberately be able to qualify for universal credit. If the Department of Work and Pensions think that you have done this, then they will not count the assets you bought as a reduction in your savings. For instance, if you had over £16,000 in savings, but then you bought a car, which would reduce your savings, making you eligible for universal credit, the Department of Work and Pensions can see this and count the value of your car as part of your savings, bringing you above the £16,000 limit and no longer being eligible for universal credit. If you're living alone, then the £16,000 in savings will just apply to you. But if you're making a joint claim, then the £16,000 limit applies to both you and whoever you're living with. When you make a joint claim, you are claiming for your household and you are eligible for universal credit if one of you in the household is eligible, even if the other is not. Earlier, I mentioned how there is an exception where 16 and 17-year-olds can be eligible for universal credit. And this happens if you are 16 or 17 and you have a disability, you are caring for someone, you're nearing the end of life, you're responsible for a child, you're pregnant, or you don't have parental support and are not under local authority care. Also, students are not usually eligible for universal credit since they are not expected to work as they are in full-time education. However, a student can be eligible for universal credit if they live with a partner who is eligible for a universal credit or they are responsible for a child. That's everything about being eligible for universal credit. I will now go over how much money you can get paid. Okay, so universal credit is made up of two parts, a standard allowance and extra payments. Your standard allowance is what you receive just for being eligible for universal credit, but you can also get extra payments if you meet certain criteria, such as for housing, having a disability, or having children. You will receive universal credit payments once a month. What you can receive for your standard payment depends if you live with a partner or not. This is because if you live alone, you're only making a claim for yourself, but if you live with a partner, then you're making a claim for your household, and your universal credit payments will be larger overall. As of 2025, the standard allowance if you're single and under 25 is £316.98p. If you're single and over 25, it is £400.14p. If you're single and live with a partner and both of you are under 25, then it is £497.55p. If you live with a partner and one of you is over 25, then it is £628.10p. These figures are the amount of money for your standard allowance. However, you can receive additional money if you meet certain circumstances. I will now go over the extra payments you can receive if you have children. If you have children who live with you, then you can get extra money. The money you get depends on when your child was born. This is because the UK implemented the 2-child limit to universal claims on the 6th of April 2017, and this makes it so you can only get extra universal credit payments for the first 2 children you have. meaning you get no extra payments for any child born after the first 2 children. But children born before the 6th of April 2017 are exempt from this limit, meaning you would get extra universal credit payments for any children born after your first 2 children. The payments you get for having children are an additional £399 a month for your firstborn child who is born before the 6th of April 2017, and you get £292.81p for your firstborn child who is born on or after the 6th of April 2017. You also get £292.81p for your second child regardless of when they were born. You typically can only get extra universal credit payments for your first and second child due to the 2-child limit. However, you can get extra universal credit payments for having more than 2 children if an exception applies. These exceptions include that your child was born before the 6th of April 2017, you were already claiming universal credit for 3 or more children before the 6th of April 2017, or another special exemption applies. The other special exemptions include situations where there are multiple births, your child is adopted, there is a non-parental caring arrangement, or the child was born as a non-consensual birth. I'll now go through each of these special exemptions one by one. The multiple births exception means that you get extra universal credit payments for your third child if they were born as a multiple birth. The caveat to this is that you can't claim for one of the children in the multiple birth. For example, if you are already claiming for 2 children and then you have twins, you will be eligible to claim extra universal credit payments for one of the twins, so you will then receive extra payments for 3 out of your 4 children. If the multiple birth includes your first or second child, then all of the children are counted for. For instance, if you have no children and then you have triplets or quadruplets, then all of your children are covered and you get extra universal credit payments for all of them. The adoption exception means that for any adopted children you have, you will get extra universal credit payments beyond the 2-child limit. This means that if you are already claiming for 2 children and then you adopt a child, you will get extra universal credit payments for that adopted child. You get this extra payment unless your child was adopted from abroad, or you or your partner were the child's biological parent or step-parent immediately before you adopted them. The non-parental caring arrangement exception applies if you are responsible for a child as part of a non-parental caring arrangement. This is where the child isn't your own, but they are under your care, such as a kinship care, fostering, or if they are placed with you by social services or the court. Also, this exception applies to children you look after without a formal arrangement, such as cases where family members other than the parents or step-parents look after the child, such as grandparents or aunts and uncles, to avoid the child going into foster care. This applies if otherwise the child would be looked after by the local authority. If you have a child who is under 16 years old living with you and they have a child of their own, since you look after the 16-year-old and therefore you also look after their child, you can get extra universal credit payments for that child. This lasts until the child's parent is 16 and can claim universal credit themselves. The non-consensual birth exception means that you get extra universal credit payments if you don't consent to the sexual act which resulted in the birth of your child. To qualify for this exemption, you must no longer be living with the child's biological parent. The extra universal credit payments you get for any child who is not affected by the 2-child limit is £292.81p a month. You will only receive this extra universal credit payment for having children until the 31st of August until the child's 16th birthday or their 19th birthday if they are in eligible education or training. You can also get extra universal credit payments if any of your children are disabled and the payment isn't affected by the 2-child limit. So if you have multiple disabled children, then you can claim for each child that is disabled. This extra is £158.76p for the lower rate or £495.87p for the upper rate. What you get depends on the benefits your child receives. The lower rate is paid if the child receives any amount of disability living allowance except the highest rate of care part, or if they receive any rate of personal independence payment except for the enhanced rate of daily living part. The higher rate is paid if the child receives the highest rate of care for disability living allowance, if they receive the enhanced rate of daily living of personal independence payment, or if they are severely sight impaired or blind. Additionally, if you have children, then you can claim up to 85% of your childcare costs if you're working whilst claiming universal credit. These childcare costs can include paying for nurseries, childminders, breakfast clubs, after school care and holiday clubs. The childcare needs to be from a registered provider. If you live with your partner, then both of you need to be working, unless one of you is unable to work due to a disability or health condition. The most you can claim for childcare each month is £1,031.88 for one child, or £1,768.94 for 2 or more children. To claim childcare costs on universal credit, you must pay your childcare costs up front and claim the money back as part of your payment. If you are struggling to pay your childcare costs up front, then you can get support. You can get this support if you're starting work or you're increasing the hours you work. If you're starting a new job, then you may be able to get all of your childcare costs paid for the first month. And if you're increasing the hours you work, then you may be able to get all your additional childcare costs paid for 1 month. You may also be able to get help if you must pay a deposit or retainer to your childcare provider. To get this support, you should talk to your work coach after you've made your claim. You can claim childcare costs for at least a month before your job starts, or at least a month after your employment ends. If you have children and made a universal credit claim, then you will need to nominate a main carer. If you are a single parent, then you will automatically be the main carer. If you are not the main carer and you are not working full-time, then you're usually expected to look for full-time work. When you are claiming universal credit and have children, you may have a responsibility to look for work depending on the age of your youngest child. If your youngest child is under 3 years old, then you will not be expected to look for work. If the child is aged between 3 and 12, then you are expected to look for work up to 30 hours a week. And if they are 13 or above, then you are expected to look for work for up to 35 hours a week. Your responsibility to work can be reduced if you have a health condition that affects your work. You are responsible for caring for a disabled person, your child has exceptional care needs, or if there is a lack of available childcare in your area. You can also get extra universal credit payments if you are disabled. This applies if you have a limited capability for work and any work-related activity, and if so, then you can get an extra £423.27 a month. You can only get one extra payment for disability for your household. So if you live with your partner and both of you have a limited capability for work, then you'll only be able to get one extra monthly payment. You must get a fit note if your condition affects your capability to work for longer than 7 days. If your fit note expires and your condition still affects your capability to work, then you need to get a new fit note. You need to get a fit note from a healthcare professional. If your condition affects your capability to work for longer than 28 days, then you may need to have a work capability assessment. The work capability assessment helps to decide how much your health condition or disability limits your capability to work. You might not be able to get an assessment if you earn over £946 a month. Until the decision of your work capability assessment, you will not receive the extra £423.27 payment for being disabled. If you're nearing the end of life, then you might be able to get universal credit payments more quickly and at a higher rate. In order for this, a medical professional must say that you have 12 months or less to live. If this applies to you, then you should ask a medical professional for the form SR1, and they should fill in the form and give it to you or send it directly to the Department of Work and Pensions. If you're making this claim, then you will not have to have a work capability assessment or make a claimant commitment. If you care for someone who gets a health or disability related benefit, then you could get an extra amount known as the carer's element. This is added to your universal credit payments if you care for someone who gets a disability or caring benefit. To be eligible, you need to provide care for them for at least 35 hours a week. If you are eligible, then you'll get an extra monthly amount of £201.68. If you live with your partner and you both care for the same person, you'll only get one extra monthly amount. If you are getting an extra amount because you have a limited capability for work and any work-related activity, then you cannot also get the carer's element. On top of any standard universal credit payment, you may also be able to get extra money to go towards your housing costs. You get this extra money if you are eligible for universal credit and you are renting. The money you get for housing can help pay for rent or service charges for private or council housing, but you cannot get universal credit payments to help with housing costs if you're living in temporary accommodation. If you're living in temporary accommodation, then you may be able to apply for housing benefit instead. There are 2 ways your housing element can be paid depending if you live in private accommodation or a council home. If you live in private accommodation, then the money you get for housing is based on the amount of bedrooms in your property that you're entitled to. The amount of bedrooms you're entitled to isn't based on how many bedrooms your property actually has, but how many bedrooms the government believes you need. This depends on your household size, your age, and where you live. You can find out how many bedrooms you're entitled to by using the Local Housing Allowance Bedroom Calculator. Each area in the UK pays a different amount of universal credit for your bedroom entitlement, and to calculate how much universal credit you can get for housing, you will need to use the Local Housing Allowance tool. If you live in a council home, then your housing element is going to be your actual rent that you pay. This is deducted by bedroom tax. Bedroom tax is money which is deducted from your housing cost entitlement depending on how many spare bedrooms you have in your council home. Your housing element will decrease by 14% if you have one spare bedroom, and it will decrease by 25% if you have 2 or more spare bedrooms. Both private and council home payments can be reduced for any eligible service charges and for non-dependents. For service charges, universal credit can only cover certain costs such as bin collection or repairs in shared areas, but it cannot cover costs such as energy or water bills. For non-dependents, if you live with someone who is 21 years old or older and they are not your partner, then your universal credit payments towards housing will decrease by £93 and 2p. This is because these people are expected to contribute towards the rent themselves. However, non-dependents will not be deducted for any of the following exceptions, which I will show now. If the money you get for housing does not cover all of your rent, then you may be able to get a discretionary housing payment from your local council. The local council has their own criteria whether you qualify for this payment, and it is completely up to them whether they offer it to you. To make a claim for discretionary housing payment, you must contact your local council and fill out the relevant forms according to their procedures. If you own your home, then you cannot get universal credit for your housing payments, but you may be able to get support for mortgage interest. SMI is a loan which goes towards your interest payments on your mortgage or any interest payments on loans you've taken out for certain repairs and improvements to your home. You're eligible for SMI if you've been on universal credit for 3 months in a row, and if you qualify for an SMI loan, then you can get help paying the interest on up to £200,000 of your mortgage. The loan is paid directly to your lender, and you'll need to repay your SMI loan back with interest when you sell or transfer ownership of your home. That is all for what you can get paid with the universal credit. I will now go over how your payments can be affected if you work. If your wages go up, then your universal credit payment will reduce. This applies for both your standard payments and any extra payments you get. For every £1 you earn for working, your universal credit payment goes down by 55p. So if you're single and under 25, claiming a standard allowance of £316.98, then you will not receive any universal credit payment if you earn £576.33p a month. There is an exception where you can earn up to a certain amount from working before the work reduction applies. This happens if you or your partner are responsible for a child, or you live with a disability that affects your ability to work. This amount is called your work allowance. Your work allowance is £411 a month if you get help with housing costs through universal credit, or you live in temporary accommodation arranged by your council because you're homeless. If neither of these circumstances apply to you, then your work allowance is £684 a month. This means that you can work and either earn up to £411 a month or £684 before work deductions apply to you. You are not expected to find work that covers all of your earnings from universal credit, and instead you are only expected to find work that pays you up to your administrative earnings threshold. The administrative earnings threshold is an amount that you can earn before you're not expected to find work. For individual claimants, the administrative earning threshold is £952 per assessment period. Additionally, if you live with your partner, then the combined couple's administrative earnings threshold is £1,534 per assessment period. If you as an individual earn below the administrative earnings threshold in an assessment period, then you must show that you're actively looking for better paid work. You will also get regular personalised support from a work coach. Your work coach can help you with job search strategies, interview skills and connecting with employers. But if you are paid an amount equal or more than your administrative earnings threshold, then you will not have regular meetings with your work coach. Your universal credit payments can be reduced if you get other benefits. Your universal credit payments will be reduced by an amount equal to the other benefit payments. This applies when you get universal credit and any of the following benefits. Also, there is a cap to the amount of money that you can receive from benefits. The cap is the maximum amount of money you can receive in a month from benefits payments. The cap itself depends if you live in or outside of Greater London, if you're single, and if your children live with you. I will now show you what the benefits cap is. Your total benefits payment cannot be more than the benefit cap. When you start claiming universal credit, you won't be affected by the benefits cap for 9 months if, before claiming universal credit, you are earning an amount equal or more than the earnings threshold, which is £946 a month. You must have been earning this for 12 months in a row, and now that you are claiming universal credit, you must be earning less than £946 a month. If this applies to you, then your universal credit payments won't be affected by the benefits cap for the first 9 months of your claim. Your universal credit payments can also be reduced based on how much you have in savings. All money, savings and investments you have in the UK and abroad are taken into account, including cash, money in your bank account and any money in your savings account. To be eligible for universal credit, you need to have no more than £16,000 in savings. But if you have more than £6,000 in savings, then your payment will be reduced. If you have between £6,000 and £16,000 in your savings, then your universal credit payments will be reduced by £4.35 for every £250 you have between £6,000 and £16,000. If you have an amount of savings that is not a complete £250, then £4.35 is taken off anyway. For instance, if you have £6,300 in savings, then £8.70 will be taken off your universal credit payment, as £4.35 is taken off for the first £250 and then another £4.35 is taken off for the other £50, which makes your total savings £6,300. Your universal credit payments are paid monthly, and to calculate what you will be paid, the Department of Work and Pensions uses assessment periods. Your assessment period is a 1-month time frame during which your income, expenses and personal circumstances are assessed to work out your universal credit payment. Your assessment period starts on the day that you submit your universal credit claim, and it runs from 1 calendar month from that date. This becomes your reoccurring monthly assessment period date. For example, if you've made your claim on the 3rd of July, your assessment period will run from the 3rd of July to the 2nd of August. You should usually be paid 7 days after the end of the assessment period. During that month, the Department of Work and Pensions will work out how much universal credit you're entitled to depending on your earnings and any deductions. After your first universal credit payment, you'll be paid on the same date of every month. If your payment date is on a weekend or bank holiday, then you'll be paid on the working day before. You can see your monthly statement in your online account. This tells you how much universal credit you're going to get. If you earn enough money in a month to hit the limit where you're no longer eligible for universal credit, then you won't be paid for that assessment period. If you earn over your limit to be eligible for universal credit in an assessment period, then that surplus money won't transfer over to your next assessment period as a surplus unless you earn more than £2,500 in an assessment period. If your wages reduce enough for you to be eligible for universal credit within 5 months, then your universal credit payment will be automatically restarted. If after 5 months, then you will need to apply again. This is meant to prevent people from stopping and restarting claims repeatedly just because of short-term earning spikes. For your universal credit payments, you can apply for an advance to get the money earlier, as when you claim universal credit, it will usually take 5 weeks for you to receive the first payment. You can apply for an advance on your account by talking to your work coach. You will then get a decision on your advance payment, which is usually done in the same day. You need to be in financial hardship in order to get an advance payment, such as not being able to pay rent or buy food. You must pay back your advance, and this is done by money being taken out of your universal credit payments each month. The amount of money you can get from your advance payment will be the value of your first payment. If you are denied an advance, then you can ask for a reconsideration, but you cannot ask for an appeal. You can also get a budgeting advance in an emergency when you're already getting universal credit. This is where you have sudden unexpected costs. You will need to repay this advance. The smallest you can borrow is £100 and the largest you can borrow is £348 if you're single, £464 if you live with your partner, and £812 if you have children. To be eligible for the advance, you need to be either getting universal credit for at least 6 months or need the money to help start a new job or stay in work. You will not be eligible if you've earned more than £2,600 in the past 6 months or £3,600 for couples. You will also not be eligible if you haven't paid off any previous budgeting advance loans. You can apply for this by speaking to your work coach or applying on your account. Also, the Department of Work and Pensions can offer you money through a flexible support fund, which is completely discretionary and you won't have to pay the money back. If you want to ask for this, then you should make sure that you tell your work coach why, as it would help, as they don't have to give it to you. Finally, you can apply for an alternative payment arrangement if you want your universal credit payment paid to you in a different method than a monthly payment. Alternative payment arrangements include paying rent directly to a landlord if you're bad with money, paying more frequently such as twice a month or 4 times a month, and a split payment between partners in a couple. An alternative payment arrangement is considered on a case-by-case basis, and if you want this, then you should speak to your work coach. Note that alternative payment arrangements are discretionary and can't be appealed. However, the decision can be reviewed. Okay, now that I have said everything about how you can be eligible for universal credit and how much you can get paid, I'll now go over the step-by-step process on how to make a universal credit application. Firstly, go on the Universal Credit online website and create an account. Once you've logged into your account, you can then start your universal credit claim. If you're making a joint claim, then your partner also needs to have an account and start their own universal credit claim. They will then be given a linking code which you will need to enter on your account so you can start your joint claim. You should then fill in all the relevant details to make sure your universal credit payment is correct. All these details are under your to-do list. Once you've confirmed your details and verified your identity, you will then need to book an appointment with your work coach and go to an interview at Job Centre Plus. Your work coach is a person working for the Department of Work and Pensions who you must meet regularly to talk about finding a job. Job Centre Plus is a government-run employment and benefits office designed to help people on low income find a job. You'll need to book this interview within a month, and if you don't, then you may need to start your universal credit application again. The Department of Work and Pensions will tell you if your interview is in person or over the phone. During the interview, your work coach will check if your details are correct and outline what the Department of Work and Pensions expects from you in return for your universal credit payments. This is because in order to claim universal credit, you must agree to have some responsibility to search for jobs and find work. This agreement with your work coach is called your claimant commitment. Your work coach will ask you about your skills and the type of job you're looking for. If you already have a job, then you might be expected to look for a better paid job or work more hours. Your commitment to look for work is based on your specific circumstances and agreed with your work coach. After you've told your work coach about your situation, they can put you in 1 or 4 groups which determine your level of commitment. The no work related requirements group doesn't require you to do anything to prepare or look for work. The work focused interview group requires you to have regular meetings with your work coach. The work preparation group requires you to meet your work coach regularly and prepare for work, including things like writing a CV and doing training or work experience. The all work related activity group requires you to do all you can to find a job and earn more, which includes looking for jobs, applying for jobs and going to interviews. Your work coach will try to get you to earn enough income so that you eventually can't claim universal credit, as your income from your job will be able to support you. In order to help you find a job, your work coach will write the tasks you need to complete on your claimant commitment. You can use your journal on your universal credit account to contact your work coach and upload any evidence of your job hunting. You can also get messages from your work coach or the Department of Work and Pensions on your journal. When you get your final claimant commitment, you need to accept it within a week. If you don't accept it within this time frame, then your universal credit claim will be closed. If you have a disability or health condition that affects your capability to work, then you can get a reduced work responsibility. After reporting on your universal credit application that you have a health condition or disability, you will still need to attend your interview with your work coach as normal, but you should tell them about your disability and they will give you a form called the UC50 form, which asks you about how your disability affects your day-to-day life. After you fill in the form, you will then have a work capability assessment to determine if you have the physical or mental capability to work. If you have a work capability assessment, you'll be sent a decision afterwards that says if you are fit to work, which can include that you are able to work and have a responsibility for looking for work. You have a limited capability, so you have a reduced responsibility to look for work, or if you have no responsibility to look for work due to you having a limited capability for work or any work-related activity. The work capability assessment can be in person, by video call, or on the phone. During the assessment, there is a strict criteria the Department of Work and Pensions uses to determine if you have a limited capability for work or a limited capability for work in any work-related activity. In order to be put in the limited capability for work group, to have a reduced responsibility to look for work, you need to score at least 15 points in total. You also qualify for this group if you don't score enough points, but there is a substantial risk to you or others if you were found not to be put in this group. This means that there is a risk that you or someone else would be in danger if you were not put in this group. For example, if you have seizures, violent outbursts, frequent falls, or need supervision to stay safe, then you could argue that it would be dangerous for you to work or have to travel to a job without help. The exact point system is quite long, so I will show you the point system and let you read through it below. In order to be put in the limited capability for work and any work-related activities group so that you have no responsibility to look for work, you must get 15 points on any one indicator except in activities 8, 9A, 10 and 15. Alternatively, you could qualify if you meet any of the descriptions in activities 18 or 19. If you don't get enough points, then you may still qualify if you would be at a substantial risk of harm if you are not put in this group. You will also be put in this group if you have a life expectancy of less than 12 months, you are waiting for, receiving or recovering from chemotherapy or radiotherapy, or you are pregnant and there is a serious risk of damage to your health or the health of the baby if you do not stop the work-related activity. If you do qualify for a limited capability to work, then your work coach will unpause or adjust your claimant commitment. Once you've agreed to your claimant commitment, you will then need to record any evidence of your job hunting on your Universal Credit Journal, which you will need to update regularly. If you fail to follow the steps of your job hunting, then your Universal Credit payments can be taken away. I will now go over the process if you fail to meet your job hunting responsibilities set out in your claimant commitment. If you're unable to follow your claimant commitment for a good reason, then you should notify your work coach so that you don't get a sanction. A good reason for being unable to follow your claimant commitment can include having a hospital appointment at the same time as a meeting, becoming unexpectedly ill, or any other relevant reason for you failing your claimant commitment. If you have a good reason, then your Universal Credit payments will not be reduced, but if you don't have a good reason, then you can get a sanction. If you get a sanction, then your Universal Credit payments will be reduced. You can check your sanctions in your journal, which will tell you how much your Universal Credit is reduced by and how long the sanction will last. You cannot have two sanctions at the same time, but sanctions can run back to back. A sanction directly reduces the amount of standard allowance you receive, but it doesn't affect any extra payments that you get. Your standard allowance will usually be reduced by 100%. That is unless you are aged 16 or 17, or your only responsibility is to attend appointments to discuss work. If these exceptions apply, then your payments will be reduced by 40% instead. There are 4 levels of sanctions that you can get. The lowest level of sanction is applied if your only responsibility is to go to appointments to discuss work and you do not do so. This sanction lasts from the date of the appointment until the day before you have another appointment. So for instance, if you miss an appointment and you have another appointment in 2 days, you only have a sanction which lasts for 1 day, since it ends the day before your new appointment. For your sanction to end, you must actually go to your new appointment. The next level of sanction is awarded if you fail to do what you're expected to do as per your claimant agreement. This includes things such as failing to attend any work-focused interviews or appointments, failing to provide any work-related evidence of your job hunting, failing to report work-related changes such as losing pay or reducing your hours, failing to go or take part in a training course or employment scheme that has been recommended as part of your work preparation, or failing to take specific action to get paid work or to increase your earnings from work. This sanction lasts from the date you fail to do the activity until the day before you do the next activity, plus a fixed number of extra days. If you have not received a sanction in the last 365 days, then the fixed number of extra days is usually 7. For example, if you were supposed to attend a training course but you missed it without a good reason, then you will be sanctioned until the day before your next training course plus 7 days. However, if you received a sanction in the last 365 days, then the fixed number of extra days added to your next sanction is usually double what your last extra days were. So if you had a previous sanction in the last 365 days with 7 extra days, then your next sanction will have 14 extra days. And if you get a sanction after that, then it will be 28 extra days. But if your previous sanction was in the last 14 days, then the number of extra days you receive on the new sanction will be the same as what you received for your previous sanction. The next level of sanction is awarded if you don't do enough to look for work. For example, you may get a medium level sanction if you do not apply for a particular job when told to do so. This level of sanction lasts for 28 days for your first sanction, and if you had a medium level sanction in the past year but not within the last 14 days, then the sanction can last up to 91 days. The next level of sanction after this is for failures to do with paid work, such as not accepting a job offer or leaving a job. You'll be sanctioned for 91 days for your first high level sanction, and if you have had a high level sanction before in the past year but not within the last 14 days, then the sanction can be up to a maximum of 182 days. If you cannot pay for your rent, heating, food or hygiene needs because you get a sanction, then you can ask for a hardship payment. This payment is a loan to cover your basic essentials, which you will pay back through your universal credit payments. To be eligible for a hardship payment, you must be struggling to meet your basic essential needs and have no other reasonable actions to take to source support. Basic needs include food, heating, hygiene and housing costs. In order to apply for a hardship payment, you must have followed all of your work-related requirements in the last 7 days. Your hardship payment will be 60% of the value of your sanction. You can get this payment until your sanction ends. You can only get one hardship payment in each assessment period. To apply, you should talk to your work coach or use your online journal. When you repay the hardship payment, your universal credit payments will be automatically reduced by up to 15% of your standard allowance until the hardship payment is repaid. If you disagree with the sanction decision, then you can ask for a review. This is known as mandatory reconsideration. You can do this by putting a note in your journal, over the phone, face to face or in writing. During your universal credit process, you can appeal or challenge almost any decision, and I will now go through how challenging a universal credit decision works. When you are given a decision concerning your universal credit, the letter containing the decision will mention your ability to apply for mandatory reconsideration. You can apply for mandatory reconsideration if you think the office dealing with your claim has made an error or if you disagree with the reason for your decision. Usually you have to ask for mandatory reconsideration within 1 month of your benefits decision. To apply for mandatory reconsideration, you should do so by using your journal or talking to your work coach. You will then be given a form to fill out, which I will show you now. When you ask for mandatory reconsideration, you will need to provide the date of the original benefit decision, your name and address, your date of birth and your national insurance number. You then need to explain what part of the decision is wrong and why. You can also send any evidence along. Once you submit the form, the benefits office will reconsider their decision and send you a letter saying if they've changed their decision. If you disagree with the mandatory reconsideration, then you can appeal to the Social Security and Child Support Tribunal, which is an independent tribunal which will handle appeals that you have about your universal credit. You can't apply to this without going through mandatory reconsideration first. Finally, to end off this video, I will now go through the offences you can be charged with for lying or not disclosing certain pieces of information during your universal credit process. If you provide false information on your universal credit claim, or if you don't report a change in your circumstances, then you are committing benefit fraud. You only commit benefit fraud if your fraud affects how much money you would be paid from the benefits you would receive. So for instance, you will only be committing fraud if you don't report a change in your circumstances that would actually affect how much you're entitled to be paid. If you're suspected of fraud, then your benefits payments may be stopped whilst you're investigated. If you're found to be guilty of benefits fraud, then you can be told to pay back the overpaid money, have your benefits reduced or stopped for up to 3 years, or even face a fine of £350 up to £5,000. That is all for this video. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have, you may want to check out other legal videos on my channel.